You know, there's a buzzword going around these days. It's called diversity. It's huge. It's a big word. It's a political word that has a lot of power. Scripture has no problem with diversity. It talks about people being given a diversity of gifts. But even with the diversity of all of those gifts that are given to us as Christians, there's still someone at the helm. There's still someone that's controlling all of those gifts. And of course, we know that that is God. Now, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but it won't be the first time. Regarding the transgender issue, it used to be that if it walked like a duck and it quacked like a duck, it was a duck. Now, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but it dresses like a chicken and wants to be a chicken, we have to call it a chicken. That's the problem that I have. Our society now has been forced by political pressure and a lot of other pressures to view something the way somebody else wants us to view it, and we're either a bigot or we're prejudiced or we're against diversity if that is the case. And that's the problem that I have with that. And not only do you have to call him a chicken, you got to let him use your bathroom. So, it's gotten to the point now to where it's no longer about my diversity or your diversity, but it's about a specific group or a couple groups where it's okay to be diverse in that area. But how about letting Christians be Christians? How about honoring and respecting a few of the things that we believe and a few of the things? And I don't think there's a Christian that I know of that would tell someone who felt they were transgender that they were not loved. I don't think they would tell them that God does not love them. So it's certainly not an issue of love. But back to these gifts. The city of Corinth, it's not any different than the city we live in. So many times we look at Scripture and we go, well, yeah, but that was a different time. That was a different place. There were different things going on there. But you look at this church that was in Corinth, and it was full of murder, rape. The city itself, it was full of greed. There was political corruption. There was almost every kind of pleasure that money could buy. But it was in the middle of this corruption that God called out a church. If you ask me, that's the perfect place to call a church. Is in the filth. It's in where the people live, down in the nitty-gritty, and it's where people are hurting and people are destroyed by society. That's where God wants His people to shine. That's where He wants them to stand up. Now, when you give your life to Jesus Christ, you're still a people. You're still a person. You're still an individual. And this church they were just full of ordinary people like us. And they had spent most of their lives, if not all of their lives, under the influence of this city and the vices of this city. The average person probably had never been more than 100 miles away from home. And Corinth was all they knew. They grew up in the middle of that corruption. I know this sounds silly, but if you've been a Christian a little while and you tried to put away the swearing, you've tried to put away hanging out with the wrong kind of people, making the wrong decisions, you're doing your best to try to live for the Lord, you kind of get used to being around people like that. But if you're around people who all day long use the Lord's name in vain. The other day, we were going through, my wife got a car, and it's got that Sirius radio that you get free for like 3 months or whatever, right? And I'm going through trying to see if I can get crosstalk radio. And I pushed a button I shouldn't have pushed because it was on some station and the guy's cussing at me. Now I realize that's a very popular thing in the world today, is to listen to music where, they're swearing every other word, but it's like I hit the button and boom, they're swearing at me. Now, if you live in a world like that, it's sad, but we acclimate. If that's who we hang out with, We acclimate to that. If we get used to hearing the F word all the time, we get to where we think that that's not a big deal anymore. If we get used to hearing the Lord's name in vain, we get to the point where we think it's not a big deal anymore. And that's what had happened to the Corinthians. They had grown accustomed to this type of life. Now, they've come to the Lord and they've been taught about the gifts, but it's hard for them to be able to make that transition. God had given and has given to all of us Christians gifts to help us live that kind of life, but sometimes it's not an easy transition. Sometimes it's exactly that, a transition. It takes a little while. And I've shared with you guys before, it's not uncommon at all when I used to stand by the door and say goodbye, is to have a brand new Christian swear at me. And you know, I didn't take offense to it. I kind of grinned because I'm thinking, here God's in the process. And most of the time they'd catch themselves and they would, come on, let's be honest. When you first became a Christian, if you lived in the world, weren't you afraid of slipping and saying something stupid? Right? Saying something that you've been trying not to say for a long time and that word coming out. So, you know, I didn't get offended. I don't get offended by that because they're making that transition. The simple fact that they would catch themselves and say, oh, I'm sorry, is something they never had before. But the Holy Spirit is working in their life. There was backbiting and division in the church. There was incest, and it was being accepted and tolerated. Christians were suing each other in the pagan courts. I know some of this you guys have heard. There was a great deal of sexual sin. The divorce rate was high. There was dishonor in the marriages, and they were even making a mockery of the Lord's Supper. Now, why all the chaos? Why all the chaos? You may be sitting here this morning, and I'm going to ask you a very personal question. Why is there so much chaos in your life? And is that chaos, has it got you tied in knots? Has it got you to the point to where you're like despairing? Because let's face it, there's trials in life. Life is going to happen. As I told you, we bought my wife a car because she had a great deal of miles on the car. So we went and bought a car. The car's less than 12 years old. She's setting it apart at a light, and a guy rear ends her. It's 12 hours old. I take it the next day to go get an estimate to have the rear end fixed, the bumper fixed, right? On the way to work, on the way down here, all of a sudden I hear a smack, and I look up. There's nobody in front of me. There's a star break in the windshield. So within a 24-hour period, right, this brand new car, we got these two things to deal with. But here's the thing. It's just a thing, right? It's just a thing. In a few years, it's going to be turned over to somebody else or end up in a heap somewhere. It's just a thing. It's just a material thing. But only God can give us the ability to look at things that way. Because otherwise, your whole life is gross. It has no meaning. It's tied to all the things. And then those things get broken or it doesn't happen the way you want it to. And pretty soon you're a victim of your own life. Rather than being on top of your own life, you're under your own life. You're a victim of all of that. Now, why such chaos? It says they came behind in no gift. They had, among them all, they had a diversity of gifts. But yet the church was a mess. Now, I'd like to propose this. Have you ever called a company, let's say it's your insurance company. These days, it's almost any company that you call because I don't know if there is such a thing as service anymore. But you call a place and you ask them, hey, how can I do this? Oh, you got the wrong department. I need to send you over to this department. Now, this is after you've been holding for anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes. Do you guys get these ones that say, hello, you are number 10 in the queue. Please hold on, and one of our representatives will be with you. So you get the representative, and he doesn't even know his name, right? He doesn't know anything. Oh, you got to go to another department. So you're on hold for the other department, and you sit there for another few minutes waiting for the other department. You finally get that department, you tell them what the need is, and they say, oh, well, you need to go to this other department. And your reply is, okay, thank you very much. No, your reply is, look, the first guy told me I needed to go to you, that you would help me. Well, I'm sorry, they were wrong. Now you're on hold again, right? You're listening to whatever they're playing, probably being cussed at. So here you are now, it's the third person. You get to the third person, you tell them what the problem is, and they say, oh, you need to be to the first guy you called, right? Now, this can go on. My wife deals with this a lot because she handles a lot of the stuff at home, and she deals with this kind of stuff a lot. Why does that happen? I'll tell you, because this department does not know what this department does. This department doesn't know what this department does. This one doesn't know what this one does, and this one doesn't know what this does. So basically, none of them know what they're doing. That was the problem with the gifts. There was no one in charge. What do I mean by that? It might not be what you think I mean. Pastor Dan did a great job explaining that with all of these gifts and all the diversities of gifts, it's still one God. They had lost the sight. They were more interested in the gifts than they were the gift giver. So there was no thread of continuity. There was no thread of unity with all of the gifts because they were using their gifts, but they were using them inappropriately. They didn't know how to use them. They were not spirit guided because they were not allowing God to be God. Now here's the thing. I used to be one of those why me guys. Why is this happening? How come this has happened to me? I'm a nice guy. You finally get to the point where you realize God's God. There is a God. And my life was a mess because I did not know God. I was trying to live my life outside of the one who made me, and it just does not work. So here they are. They're trying their best to live their life. They know that they need to change, but they haven't been in the Lord long enough to realize they need to learn how to love God. It's a lot of substitutes for the word love. And I honestly think it's been so cheapened that we really don't know what love is anymore. They had been given these gifts, but these gifts were to build up one another, not tear each other down. To build each other up. I don't know anyone in here this morning that couldn't use being built up. I don't know of one person that couldn't use a little bit of encouragement or a just, hey, hang in there, I love you and God loves you. Even a hug. I don't know of anyone in here that couldn't use that. But sometimes we are so busy. We got so much else going on, and the one that we love the most is ourselves. Guys, that's not for you. That's for every single human being on the planet. The one we love the most is usually ourselves. We're looking out for ourselves. And that's why we get so busy. That's why we don't have time to stop and give someone a hug, to hang around a little bit and say hi, because we're too concerned about how we feel and how our life is going. So, Pastor Dan, at the end of this teaching last week, he said, you got this gift, you got this gift, you got this diversity of gift that God gives to whomever he will, any way he will. And even though two of you might have the same gift, because you're different in personality, it's going to exercise itself in a different way. So he goes through all of those gifts, and then he says in 1 Corinthians 12:31, he says, but desire or earnestly desire the best gifts, and I will show you a more excellent way. What is that way? What? Love. Now, I know that when we say love, it's a little word. But the scripture tells us that God is love. Please, try to wrap all of the meaning of love that you've ever heard of into one image of Jesus. God is love. If you look at Jesus, you look at the cross, you don't have to wonder what love is. But it's probably not the way many of us are exercising our love. Alan Redpath said this. He says, there are some strange substitutes for love which master many people. A colleague of mine in the ministry had a hectic phone call from a young lady who said to him, Pastor, what should I do? There's a man who loves me so much that he says if I don't marry him, he will shoot himself. What shall I do? My friend replied, nothing. Let him shoot himself. Such a threat is not love. It is pure selfishness, desire, lust, whatever ugly word you might want to call it. Okay, so go take a look at these three words that the Greeks used for the word love. In some of your Bibles, it's translated charity, but that's not a really good translation for us. It's a good translation, but not for us today. And why? Because we look at charity in a completely different way, don't we? When you hear the word charity, do you think of love, or do you think of somebody wanting something for nothing? Or a charity that you donate to? We look at it differently. We don't really see it as love. You guys know that the Greeks had those three words for love. They had eros. But by the way, the eros means the sexual desire, and you might not realize it, but it's not, that word is not found in the New Testament at all. And it's only found in a couple places in the Old Testament. Maybe because it was so, it had been corrupted to mean more filth than it meant good. But it's not in the New Testament at all. The second one is phileo, occasionally found in the New Testament. And you guys have heard the teaching before. It's where we get the word Philadelphia from. It means brotherly love, concern for one another. But there's a higher one. There's another word that was used, and it was the absolute highest form of love. Okay, now, I hope we understand that, because Peter went through it. When Jesus said, Peter, do you love me? And he goes, you know I like you. Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me? The highest form of love. And Peter said, you know I like you, Lord. When he got to the third time and the same thing occurred, Peter said again, you know I love you, Lord. But it was, I like you, Lord. He used the word phileo. And then he was ashamed. He was embarrassed. You know why? Not because he didn't understand the Greek words. He was embarrassed because, you know what he said, Lord, you know. You know what he was saying with that? You know my heart. I can't fool you. I can't turn around here and tell you that I really love you when I don't. I like you a lot. And I think for a lot of times with us as Christians, we're kind of like that. Lord, you know I love you. I like you a lot. But love you? Love costs. You know, love can be painful. If you go through this life without love and not wanting love because you don't want to get hurt, you're going to be a lonesome victor. You may be victorious of staying away from it, but you're going to be the loneliest person on the planet. Love is risky. This word agape, it's where we get the word agony from. If you've ever been in love, you know it hurts. It's awesome, it's amazing, it's wonderful, but it hurts. The band Nazareth, that some of you guys would remember, if you're under 20, you probably never heard of them, but if some of you guys remember the band Nazareth, they had a song called Love Hurts. And some of the lines in there is, love hurts, love scars, love wounds, and love mars. That is a great definition of Jesus at the cross, is it not? Love hurts. If you love someone and it doesn't hurt you to love them, you don't love them. It's going to hurt once in a while. You're going to have to give up what you think you want to give them what they want. They're going to do or say something once in a while that's going to rip your heart out. That's love. I mean, it's just honest. It's love. It scars. You know, you can't love someone without ending up with a few scars. And it wounds. And it mars. You might say, well, that's the reason I don't want it. That's the reason Christians don't want to press in and love the Lord with all of their heart. I don't want to hurt. I don't want that sacrifice. I don't want to be marred. And yet John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life." And boy, doesn't that put it in a sentence right there? This kind of love speaks of self-denial. It's when you make a decision to love. Oh yeah, your heart may beat for that person, that individual, but you make a decision to love. What do I mean by that? I don't wake up one morning and say, well, I just don't feel like loving Becky anymore. Tomorrow I may feel different. But today, nope. In fact, I think I'll take a week off from loving my wife. Maybe 2 weeks. It's been a rough month. You know, I don't do that. Whether I feel good or not that day, I've made a commitment to my wife. I love her. She gives up for me, I give up for her. She sacrifices for me, I sacrifice for her. Emotions have nothing to do with it. It's great when it's all there, but how about the times it's not? You see, we live in a society when you wake up one morning and you don't feel like it, you get a divorce and get a new one. Christians are the same way. I wake up one morning and I don't feel like going to church. I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like being committed to God. I don't feel like this interferes with. A lot of us, even as adult Christians, if our kids acted the way we do, they would be punished. You signed up for soccer, you're going to finish soccer. You don't back out of everything just because you don't. It's a little tough this time. Wouldn't we do that to teach them some responsibility? And yet as adults sometimes we pick and choose. But that's not really love. Love is sacrificial. Matthew 5:44 says, "But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." I may not agree with the diversity agenda, but I don't hate anyone. And there's not one person that I would not pray all of God's promises for. Has nothing to do with my own personal comfort level. It has to do with seeing them as a child of God. I may think that some of their beliefs are a little whack. People may think some of mine are a little whack. But we're supposed to love even when it doesn't feel right. Feelings will often say no. And I'll tell you what the enemy does. He likes to start making us. It can be anything, right? It can be something that someone says at a gas station pump. It can be something that somebody says in a checkout line. It can be something that a spouse or a wife says, and it just kind of hits us, right? And all of a sudden we feel unappreciated. Well, guess what? I'm going to make you appreciate me. I will make your life miserable until you appreciate me. And all we do is make them hate us more, right? By trying to do that. But again, let's back up and say, what is the root of that? What is it that makes me say, I'm not appreciated? Well, I'm on the throne. You need to bow. You didn't bow. Now, I know that's an exaggeration, but it's selfishness. It's selfishness that makes me believe that I deserve anything. But when you and I come to know the Lord, if we really begin to love Him, we realize we don't deserve anything except judgment. And everything else is gravy. Everything else is grace. Everything else is grace. It's the only word, agape is the only word that's used to describe God. 1 John 4:8 says, the one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. As I said, you saw the thing with Peter, and he finally was so embarrassed that it broke his heart. He realized that he really didn't love the way he needed to. And you know, I spent a lot of time praying about this weekend, and I realized I don't love the way I need to love. I don't love the way I need to love. It needs to be more sacrificial. It needs to be a lot less of me and a whole lot more of other people and above everything, the Lord. To just be in love with Him so much, to fall in love with Him so deeply that everything else is incidental. That everything else just doesn't matter. Look at 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. It says, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and I do not have love, I've become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, though I have the gift of prophecy and I understand all mysteries, and I have all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. This is what he told Corinthians. With all those gifts, this is what he told them. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Now, if I stood up here to one of these cymbals, and I grabbed a drumstick, and I just banged on it a little while, and I told you it was a gift from God, after a while, you would think I was absolutely nuts. But that's what he's saying. He's saying, you guys all have all of these gifts, but that's what it sounds like. You have all of these gifts to where you can be building each other up, doing church the way church is meant to be done, out of true and honest love. And instead, you're over here just banging on the cymbal. And it's not blessing anybody. It's not doing anything. It's just not working. That's what he's saying. Love is the power behind all of the gifts. And love is the power behind all effective communication. The greatest teacher, I guess I should say, if they teach without there being love, they might as well just not do it at all. And I think there is a danger for us that have been in the Lord a while that we just do it. We push the button and the machine runs. And I'm not saying that we're not going to have days like that, but what I am saying is that sacrifice without love means nothing. In Psalm 51, verses 16 and 17, it says, for you do not desire sacrifice, or else I would give it. You do not delight in the burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. You know what that means? That means a heart that just loves Him. The highest form loves Him. Some of our spouses are not into maybe necessarily a lot of flowers or a lot of gifts, but there's not a spouse around that will not accept genuine love. The kind of love that makes them feel like they're the most blessed person on the planet. That's rare. That's hard to come by. Look at what love is and love's not. Look at verses 4 through 8. Love suffers long, but it's kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. It doesn't behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It's not provoked. It thinks no evil. It does not rejoice in sin or iniquity, but it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. And it endures all things. Love never fails. Love is the only thing that has a lifetime guarantee. Let me change that. Love is the only thing that has an eternal guarantee. We had to pay extra for extended mileage guarantee. Here's the one thing that will last throughout all of eternity, and that is God's love. It's the only thing that's going to last. Love never fails. But if there are prophecies, they're going to fail. Whether there's tongues, they're going to cease. Whether there's knowledge, it's going to all vanish away. So guys, as we go through these, and I'm going to I'll go through them fairly quickly, but I want you to ask, when we go through these, I want you to ask yourself, is that me? Do I exhibit this? Do I have this quality? Love suffers long, it is patient, and it is kind. So you see, agape, the real love, affects the way we react to people. Our reaction to people. It suffers, it agonizes, yet it does not strike back. And how unlike it is it of us? There was a saying a while back, I don't get back, I get even. That's kind of our nature. But love doesn't strike back. In Matthew 18:21, Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? And he thought that was a great thing. Most of us would say, gosh, if somebody does the same thing to me, if someone messes me up, and they do it over and over again, if I forgive them 7 times and on the 8th I want to kill them, I'm doing pretty good. Peter really thought that if he could forgive somebody up to 7 times, that would be enough. That's all that the Lord would require. But what was the Lord's response? There's no limit. Can't set a number on it, Peter. If you've ever been a parent, you learn this lesson quickly, don't you? Your kids disappoint you. We disappoint the kids. But people that you love, you forgive. You dig down in a little deeper and you find what grace is about. You find out what true love is really about. But I want you to see the end of that. It says, and it is kind. Now it takes on a whole different meaning, doesn't it? Not only do you suffer, but you shut up about it. You know what I mean? Not only do you suffer, but you don't grumble. We don't grumble about it. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but are you beginning to see on the very first one, you and I are not capable of this? This has to be something that comes from God, because we're not capable of it. It is kind. There's going to be a lot of hurts in this life, but if we're going to really love people, we have to make a decision ahead of time that we're not going to retaliate. Now, it says that real love doesn't envy, means it's not jealous. Here we go again. Not jealous. Envy is not love. There's going to be lots of things in life that seem unfair. But we have to believe that if God's in the middle of it all, God's fair. God's always fair. God cannot be unfair. So although we may not see it, we have to believe it. Because if you and I can believe it, then whether it's a car, whether it's a job, whether it's anything else, a marriage, we can always say, hey, God's in charge. Everything's always going to look greener and bigger and better on the outside. But real ministry, real love is always the same. It smells of agony. It means it's going to cost me something to love. If I decide to love anyone, it's going to cost me something to do that. But that's okay, because it cost Jesus to love us. But he still made that decision. Now, it says it doesn't parade himself. It doesn't brag. Jesus never showed off. That's not us. Look at Facebook. I mean, seriously. Seriously. In most cases, you go to a Facebook page and it's a picture that was in there from 20 years ago. And we don't put the things in there that are bad. We don't go to Facebook and say, I'm a jerk. I yell when I'm not supposed to. I pick who I'm going to love and I don't love. And I'm mean and I'm nasty. And, you know, what do we put in there? We put all the best, absolute things that we possibly can. If an expression of love has to be for other people to see, and that's the only time it's given, you really have to question whether it's real. See this all the time with guys and gals. You go down to the mall or whatever, and a good-looking girl walks by. Wife grab the husband, put him up close. Or just the opposite. Good-looking guy walks by, the husband grabs his... He hasn't touched her the whole time they've been walking down the hallway, but this good-looking guy shows up, all of a sudden he's close. Yeah, we're weird. You know? Human beings are weird people. G. Campbell Morgan said this. He said, love that talks of love is not love. If anyone is consistently protesting to me that they love me, I begin to have doubts in my own mind. Love that must boast is conceited and it's prideful. That's why Paul says in 1 Timothy 2:9, it says, in like manner also, that the women adorn themselves modestly, in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. And then again in 1 Peter 3, verses 3 and 4, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging of the hair, wearing of the gold, putting on the fine apparel, but rather let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle spirit, a quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. But it would be a mistake to think that that applies just to the ladies. It applies to guys too. Guys, if you're spending, 2.5 hours on your hair, you can look forward to this. You're wasting your time. It's a losing battle. Here's my point. God is just trying to tell us there's more to life than that. There's more to life than the fake mirror that you hold up. The impression you want everybody to have of us. It's vacuous. It's really kind of meaningless. And it says again here that true love is not puffed up. That means arrogant. You meet people and it's like, oh, you live on that side of the street? Do you realize that there's places in town, if you live on one side of the freeway, you're really in a cool spot. But if you live on the other side of the freeway, it's not as cool as the other side of the freeway? I'm serious. I'm dead serious. You live on one side of town? Oh, you're from there. I won't use the word. But it's stupid. Love is never selfish or contemptuous of other people. It doesn't have to put on airs to be bigger than what it is. Love is not pretending to be something that we're not. You really love someone. Or if someone is going to love you, just make sure they're who they are. How are you going to last 40, 50 years in a marriage, 60, 70 years? How are you going to last if you don't know who you are? And you choose to love each other in spite of that. Not because of it, but in spite of it. I love you. I know everything about you, and I choose to love you anyway. Love doesn't behave rudely. It says in some of your scriptures, act unbecomingly. Love is always polite, and love is courteous. Jesus always said the right thing at the right time and the right way. He didn't say ugly, brutal things in the name of honesty. Oh yeah, well, you're fat. Well, I may be fat, but I can lose weight, and you're ugly. Christians can get nasty, can't they? Like I said, we're sorry, a lot of folks. But God saved us. God has saved us. It doesn't seek its own. True love is self-emptying. Like with even Jesus, he said, Father, not my will, but your will be done, when he was facing the hardest time of his life. How many times do we say to our spouse or to someone that we really love and care about, no, you go ahead and have it? Now, guys, I know men, I know men probably better than I know women, even though I've been married a long time. Men, wives give up stuff for us all the time. You give them some money to go buy a dress. They'll buy one for 1/3 the price, spend the rest on the family. If there's an extra taquito, she'll give it to you. If there's extra fries, she'll give them to you. And we're like, oh yeah. There's not even a thought in our mind that goes, no, I shouldn't do this. I should leave this for her. I should give back. Like I said, it's convicting. Does not seek its own. We're concerned about the welfare of each other. And you know what, guys? If we're using these gifts properly inside of a church, it makes for an awesome church. It says it's not easily provoked. Oh, man, how many times have you heard guys say, leave me alone, I had a bad day at work? How come you're asking me that? True love is not thin-skinned. It's not temperamental, and it's not quick to be offended. We quickly assume that if someone dislikes us or they're quickly offended by them, here, let me put it back. As Christians, we need to not be so sensitive that we're freaking out about every little thing. If your spouse doesn't ask you something in the right way, you got to wrap it and pack it a certain way. You know, Daddy. We gotta. Daddy needs to grow up. Mama needs to grow up. The kids need to grow up. Love is not easily provoked. We're not looking for a reason to be hurt. We're not looking for a reason to be angry or to be mad. Now, I'm not saying we're not human, and I'm not saying it gives the other spouse a reason to be mean. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that we need to not be so. Hey, while you're up, would you get me a drink of water? What? Can't you get your own? Your arms painted on? You know, I'm sorry. We just need to not be looking for a fight all the time. You know, just there needs to be a response of kindness and courtesy and love. All right, I need to keep moving. True love thinks no evil. It doesn't take into account a wrong suffered. You know what this means? It means it doesn't keep a record. It doesn't keep a record. Do you realize you just did this to me? Oh, yeah? Well, let me get out my notebook and let me unfold it before you, and I can cite 45 times where you've done the same thing to me. True love doesn't work that way. True love doesn't keep an account of those things. Why don't we accept this? We're all sinners saved by God's grace, right? If you're a Christian, you're a sinner saved by God's grace. If you're not a Christian, you're just a sinner. But we're all sinners. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to offend each other once in a while. We're going to hurt each other, sometimes without even realizing we've done it. And in a relationship, you're going to hurt each other sometimes without even realizing that you've done it. But we can all say, I'm sorry. Right? We can all apologize. We can all try to learn from that other person what it was that we said or we did that hurt them and change it. That's the way that it's supposed to be. Love thinks no evil. We don't automatically think, you did this to me, you're an evil person. Well, if all have sinned and fallen short of the grace of God, aren't we all a bit evil? Left to our own devices. Again, guys, you can't love like this without Jesus. So if Jesus is not the center of our life, we're going to come up with evil. We're going to pay people back for what they've done. It also says next that it doesn't rejoice in sin. It doesn't rejoice in iniquity. Iniquity in this case is sin. When we see a brother or sister caught in a sin, it should break our heart. We see somebody that's fallen back into alcoholism or drug addiction, it should break our heart. We shouldn't have the attitude that says, I know, it's just a matter of time. It should be, man, what can I do? How can I help? Jesus' ministry was to the sinner. His heart was broken over the slavery that he saw them in as a result of their sin. Because that's what sin does. It makes slaves out of us. We lose choice. We no longer have a choice. We're a victim of this drug or that drug or our anger or whatever else it might be. A few more here, guys. Love, true love, bears all things. It bears all things. What does that mean? It means it suffers without retaliation. Somebody does you wrong, you take it to the Lord, you ask the Lord to deal with it, take care of it, and then you leave it alone. You don't set out to try to get that person back. It's kind of like putting up an umbrella. Actually, this meaning here, the meaning is, the visual picture is putting up an umbrella and inviting somebody to stand under it with you. You bring them in. You don't push them away, but you bring them in. Look at what we did to Jesus. Look at what we said about Jesus. Look at the acts that we committed against Jesus. But he put up the umbrella of grace and he said, you guys, come on in. Why, if he would have said, oh no, that one's messed up about 150 times. I'm not bringing them into the umbrella. It believes all things. Love believes all things. Now, this doesn't mean that it's like people say love is blind. I think love has to be with your eyes wide open, not blind at all. It can blind us, but it needs to be with our eyes wide open. But love believes all things. It doesn't mean that it's a stupid kind of blind love, but what it means is that when a person fails or falls, we believe the good in them. We believe that they fought. See, sometimes we have no idea how long they fought before they fell. If you're a soldier and you're in battle and you're friends, you look over and this guy took a bullet and he falls, you don't go, well, he deserved that. He probably didn't learn his combat. He probably did. You don't do that, do you? What do? You go over and grab him and you protect him. You pull him off the battlefield, leave no man behind. That's what a church is about. We leave no man behind. If someone falls, we don't just automatically assume that they didn't fight. We don't assume that they didn't even try. We do everything that we possibly can to build them back up. We believe the best in people, not the worst. And guys, as we go through this, if God says, hey, you got this person you need to apologize to, or you believe that, we got to do that. We got to clean that stuff up in our life. Just a couple more. Love hopes all things. Love doesn't despair. True agape love is always optimistic. What do I mean by that? You see, if you and I really believe that there's a God, and that this God controls the universe, that he's in charge of every absolute thing, what is there to despair over? We lose a house, it's just a stupid house. You lose a car, it's just going to be a rust bucket. How about a life? How about if we lose a life? That's why you and I are trying our best to tell other people about Jesus, because the loss of a material life here is not the same as eternity. If that person knows Jesus, they're going to live forever, and that's why we do what we do, is so that people will know Jesus Christ. Yes, it's a loss, and yes, it hurts, but if they know Jesus, it's not over. because that life is eternal. So I can hope in all things. I can believe in all things. I can hope in all things because God is in charge. It has nothing to do with my material possessions. It has to do with my God. I can endure all things because I know that God endured everything for me. I can endure. I can get through this. Now I'll close with this. Look at verse 8. It says, love never fails. Love never fails. Whether there are prophecies, they'll fail, and on and on. Why? Because God is love. So therefore, love will never fail. 13:11, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away those childish things. Why do you think he's saying that? Because the church is immature. They're acting like children, not adults. And you know what? I firmly believe that God spoke to me personally, and I think he's saying it to our whole church, and that's we got to step up. And I don't know what all that means. I honestly don't know. I know what it means for me. I don't know what it means for you, but I do know that God is telling me, you got to go to the next level. You got to go to the next level. There's another step in this depth of love for me. There's another step for it. All right, then in 12 and 13, he says, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then when we see him, it'll be face to face. He says, now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am known. And he says, now abide these, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is what? Greatest of these is love. Here's another one from Alan Redpath, and then we'll pray. It says, some people say that in certain churches there's no sense of worship. Let me say that again. Some people say that in certain churches there is no sense of worship. Maybe they are right. But what do you think can make a sense of worship in a congregation? In other words, what do you think makes real worship? It is not aesthetic beauty. It is not a building. It is not a psychological atmosphere. Here it is, guys. It is a congregation who has given themselves to God, in whose lives there is love and sacrifice to the limit. Then that church is just lit up with the glory of the indwelling Christ.